Uh, in this recording, I'd like to walk you through the week 5 and week 6. So I'm combining 2 weeks, and you will be monitoring and linking the economic data. So your reading assignment mostly comes from the textbook Economic Indicators by Barnard, and our objective for the next 2 weeks is to research the data and be able to link it to investments. So you will be creating what I like to call economic journal, and I will kind of walk you through, what you should be doing, and you will pace yourself. It is by design done this way for you to do it over the next 10 days or 12 days, and you're going to submit it on a Saturday at the end of week 7. Second, I'm sorry. So with the 6th week, you will be posting it. So it is a combined week 6 and week 5 and week 6 combined. The idea is to look at the business and economic data, looking at the trend, and try to link it to the learning outcomes. So during this week, there are no reflection discussions for these 2 weeks. You will be doing the research, and you're going to be creating your own economic journal as one of the 2 assignments. There are 2 assignments for this over the next 2 weeks. A total is 15 points. Again, they are both due on June 15th, Saturday 10 p.m. This time around, because as you're getting close to the second, obviously now we're in the second half of the semester. A reminder, this is Saturday 10 p.m., not Sunday, and you have almost 2 weeks, and the Dropbox will close at 10 p.m. on June 15th, and this time around there are no exceptions. There will be 2 Dropboxes, one for the economic journal, there's about 10 points, and one for the Excel asset allocation exercise. So what is the learning outcome for the economic journal? It is to take the macroeconomic data that you will be reading in the textbook, and you will also read some additional material that I have posted from different economic textbooks that provides a very good descriptions of major economic data like gross domestic product, inflation, unemployment, fiscal policies, and monetary policies. Important for you to read them. You will need them for this exercise, but equally important, that knowledge you will also need it for the week 7 and week 8. The reading assignment from the Demystifying Investments, you should be done by now reading the book. I believe there's only one chapter left that you may not have read. It's called The Asset Location, where the book talks about things like 401k and IRA and so on. Okay. So continuing with what you are going to do, you're going to start to read the book, and I presume you've already done that. But these 2 weeks are really dedicated mostly to the economic. 90% of the effort, or 80+% of the effort, is economic data. So what I want you to do is obviously you should have started to read chapter 1 and 2 by now, and if you have not, please read so, because they were assigned before. And again, if you have not read it so far, that is okay, but now you have 2 weeks to really read chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. And the chapter 3, especially these chapters, plus that you really want to read and understand what it means. And again, you will need that to do your journal. So what is the journal? Journal will be journal would be your economic data journal, where you're trying to synthesize the data, and out of the 15 points for these combined 2 weeks, 10 points are for the journal. You will pick 10 key indicators from the book. As you have gone through the book and you will go through the book, you're going to find there are 10 key indicators in the book. Now, one of the things you also want to do in chapter 1 is to, when you start to read the text, you're going to find, for example, on page 8, it shows the, some of the key indicators on the right side of the page. On the left side, it shows some of the, how does it relate to, for example, how do some of the indicators relate to the GDP, and how does it relate to the, the goods and services and so on. And you want to understand that. The second thing that is really, really important to understand also is, as you go through, is a business cycle that is covered on page, page 20 on, and it shows the business cycle. So you can see, depending upon where the economic growth is, and again, when you read about the GDP in the supplemental material, you will, if you don't know much about GDP, if you have not taken economics, for a while, or you did not take economics in your undergraduate, that will give you a good summary of what GDP is, in the supplemental material. GDP is a measure of, it kind of describes, the GDP growth is up or down, it describes the economic cycle. So go through that material. Obviously, you can do some own research. There is a lot of good material out there. And in the textbook, read chapter 2, where they talk about the business cycle. So the whole idea for this exercise is to really, as a business person, or especially for the investment strategy, what this class is all about, is what you do is to kind of get familiarized with the data. So when you start to see the news, you start to hear from the news, you get a good connection what it means. So the assignment is, you're going to pick 10 key indicators. You choose what they are from the text, and there are obviously many of them. But you want to pick ones that have high, or some are even higher, but no lower than medium. Higher the better. So what do I mean by that? For example, if you look at the anything to do with the employment data, obviously it is so important that if you read the book, it will say the market sensitivity is very high. That means that if the unemployment situation gets worse, obviously people spend less money, and hence it's going to start to affect the businesses, and they'll drive the stock market down. So that is really, really important. For example, weekly claims, that's the data that comes out for, how many people are applying for unemployment benefits. It comes out every week on Thursdays, 8:30 in the morning. So I want you to do is, for the next couple of weeks, catch up on it to see what is, for the 2 Thursdays over the next 2 weeks, get the news and see what they're saying about the weekly claims. They will see there will be analysis associated with it. That comes out every week on Thursday. That is also, the importance is very, very high. An example of something not that important, for example, if we take something like e-commerce retail sales, that comes out, every few weeks, once a quarter typically, and that is not as sensitive. So you'll see that the book will say that the market sensitivity is very, very low. On the other hand, another example of high would be the durable goods orders. This is, what are the companies, the manufacturing, large companies ordering for durable goods, and this data also is really, really important. And it comes out once a month, and to see what is the, the data is coming out over the next couple of weeks. So your goal is to really look at the next couple of weeks to see find the key indicators that have a high sensitivity, no lower than medium, typically high or very high. That would be what you want to do. See what data is coming out over the next 2 weeks, and if the data is already come out over the last couple of weeks, at least go see that data. So for each indicator, you are going to obviously, describe the source of data. How often does it come out? Recent data. This at least is kind of a quick snapshot of something that if somebody was reading your journal, they will say, okay, I understand the data. Why did you pick it, etc. Then in your own words, you're going to describe how does this data, based on the trend, which means it has been going up or down, how do you think it's going to affect something that is stock related? Be individual stocks or mutual funds that are stock related, or how will it relate to fixed income, which basically means bonds or bonds related funds? How would that affect that? And the other thing you want to also touch on is, does this data affect every industry or select industry? Every industry means that basically the whole market gets affected, where a specific industry would be, say, retail or banking or energy. So, for example, if you look at the consumer sentiment data, that typically has an effect, obviously, across the board, but has a big effect on spending. Obviously, if people are feeling good about it, they're going to spend more money. If they're feeling not so good about it, their confidence level is low, the sentiment is low, they're going to spend less money. And hence, obviously, the consumer spending will be less. And that could have a big effect, positive or negative, on auto industry or travel industry or retail stores and so on. And so the important part of this part of the section is to explain why. It is really the exercise of learning the synthesizing. So you're starting from what data you're picking, why you're picking it, explaining it, how does it affect the stocks or bond, does it affect the whole market or just specific industry, and then you want to get into to see what are some of the recent news that came out that is related to the specific data, and you want to comment on that. And again, the time horizon for the news obviously is this 2-week horizon that we are going to write the journal. And finally, this is really, really important for you. And the reason why you took the course is obviously to start to understand some of this, economic mumbo jumbo. In your own words, describe how would you use this indicator as part of investment strategy. What does this mean to you? And obviously, you're not learning to be a short-term investor. You want to understand what implications are in the long term, and you want to start to make a comment. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take your journal, and when I want you to take 2 weeks to really write it, take your time writing it, and then that will kind of become your foundation. And so when we get into week 7 and week 8, we're going to take some of this economic knowledge and what we have learned so far with the time value of money and asset allocation. And the week 7 and week 8, we're going to start to put it all together, as a strategy. So, how long will this thing be? I would suggest maybe, don't write too much. Be kind of, make sure the information is relevant. I would say probably 1 page per metric, so you're probably going to have a total of 10 pages. The other thing I would really, really strongly recommend, do not wait till Thursday or Friday before it is due. You will not get the value of this exercise. I really strongly recommend, try to do it every day, no more than, every other day. You really, you're here to learn, obviously, so I strongly recommend if you're going to get the maximum learning from this journal exercise, please do the journal every day, and this will really help you decipher the economic data. And again, remember, this is about data and trend for the data, and not about just news item. You want to do is to pick the metric that you think is important. Obviously, it has to be, sensitive to the investments, high sensitivity, or at least no lower than medium. Okay. The second exercise is kind of follow over what we have done before. Okay. This would be a quick asset allocation using Excel, here we have 2 examples. One is somebody that is very, very young. Okay, so this is an Excel file. You're going to post it in the box that it will say asset allocation exercise. You're gonna file your Excel file in those. You're gonna post it there. So here we're gonna take somebody who's young, like say Jack. So Jack is very, very young. He's 20 years old, just starting out, maybe just finished college, and only has $1,000 to start out with, and in his 401k, maybe he got a graduation present, he wants to put it in some account. Now he plans to put in additional in his 401k. He plans to put additional $1,000 every year, but he's not sure where to put it. So he basically said, okay, not sure, I'll just do 50-50. So he said, okay, I'm going to put 50% in the stock fund and 50% in the bond fund, and I'm going to let it ride. And so the exercise is to say, okay, based on the fund growth rate, so I just give you kind of 2 funds. Let's say Fund A, which is a stock fund, is typically has grown about 6%, and the bond fund has grown 4%, and that's a growth rate over the, say, past 10 years. What if they grow at the same rate? So we're going to make an assumption they're going to grow at the same rate. So your job is to forecast how much will he have each fund, over the next 10-year periods. For example, how much will he have 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and obviously age will be 30, 40, and 50, and you're going to calculate the amount, he will have in each fund. And again, obviously you're going to use Excel, and how to use Excel, you're going to use Excel, but you're going to find the financial formulas, and you're going to look for the future value formula, and where you'll see it'll ask you for things like what is the rate you should be using, R, and the and the N period and so on, and you're going to use that formula to figure out what these should be. And then then you're going to add them up to say, okay, add them up, what will look like. So the first thing you're going to do is to, using this thing, assuming that it's going to put 50-50 in each account, you're going to calculate what the value would be. So for each one, for example, if you were doing this one over here at the age of 30, 10 years from now, he has got $500, which is the 50% of the 1,000 he has. Then he's putting in $1,000 more every period, of which half will go into the stock fund and the other half is going to go to the bond fund. So you basically are going to, for each of these boxes, you are going to calculate the future value, and the future value will be a function of what is the present value, and which is 500 in this case. What is the PMT, which will be one of the parameters it will ask you, and would be half of that, so it would be 500. And then what is the R? R is going to be, for the stock fund, is going to be 6%. We're going to put in 0.06 in the Excel file. It's going to ask you what is the N. So for this one, the N will be 10, and you will calculate the future value. So when you get to the 20-year, basically you will do the same thing, except now N will be 20, and the next one, the N will be 30. Okay, same exercise. We want to do it again. Okay, now for each one of them, I would also like you to do, so let me just talk about the second one. Second one is very, very similar, except we have just different numbers. So basically, looking at a person this time around, she's 30 years old. She's got a little bit more money to start out with, and she's planning to put a little bit more every year. We're going to do the same exercise to see what she will have in the future. Now, for both of them, and I'll just use it over here, the same comments apply with the one above with Jack. For the both of them, what I'd like you to also do is, based on the learning, in the Demystify book, where you learned about the asset allocation, it also talks about the rule of 100. Based on the content in the textbook, provide your assessment for Jill's current and future allocation. So if you were recommending, or you were having a conversation with Jill, what would you recommend her as far as the allocation based on the learnings in the textbook? And then what would you recommend? So you basically are going to analyze, provide the data, calculate the data, and in addition to, for both of them, you're also, so the formats of both are exactly the same. You're also, after you've calculated these numbers over here, which is the future value for different periods, again, remember this is 1,500, so half will go to one fund, 750 will go to one fund, 750 will go to the other fund. She's starting with 30,000, so the current basically is half in one and half in the other. But over here, you want you to do is to calculate what would the asset allocation be, which means that whatever the number she has in total, how much does she have at the age of 40 that is in stock fund versus the bond fund, and age of 50 and so on. And then make a comment based on, if you were following what is described in the text of asset allocation, what kind of allocation should she have? Should she have what this is, or should she have something else? But you basically can create a table and say, okay, based on, if I read the book, at this stage of her life, she should have this percent in asset and this, stock, and this percent in bonds, and kind of make some comments and do the same thing for the one above, for Jack. So, and again, finally, please don't paste this. I think this is, could be a lot of work for many of you, both in terms of Excel and also the journal. Again, they are due, so you got 2 weeks to do it. So please, please pace yourself, so this will help you with your learning. So.